Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Harrison Tinsley Show. Today, we're joined by my good friend Seth. How's it going, bro?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. I'm stoked to have you here. You've got such a great story, such an inspiration. I love how you take the time to uplift others. I think that's one of the most meaningful things you can do in life. So,
Yeah, absolutely, man. Thank you. I get that a lot, so it's cool. It's cool. It's cool to go through what I've gone through, have the story that I have, and be able to share it the way that I do. That hopefully inspires people.
yeah, I mean, taking something which I think could be viewed as pretty negative, but you're bringing so much light to the world instead
Right.
of repeating that, which is incredible.
Yeah. 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 Thank you. It's just recycling the pain, recycling the whatever you go through into something better.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, man. Well, tell us about you. How'd you grow up? How'd you become who you are? How'd you start speaking the way you do? Tell us what you went through, whatever you want to share. I'm sure that people would be interested. It's a crazy story.
Yeah, it is a crazy story, and there's never enough time to share it in its entirety. Not anymore. Um, you know, there's a lot of platforms that are out there that I've done that on, and it takes up a bulk of the conversation. But also, just in general, it would take me hours upon hours to really explain the full depth of my story. So even when I go and speak at an engagement, it's a very brief, very brief version of what I've gone through. And basically, what that is, I grew up in Northwest Ohio. I was born and raised up there. My mother, she was young. She was like 16, 17, 18 when she started having me and my sisters. She had all three of us back to back to back, so we're all 1 year apart. And when I was around 2 years old, my father my mom and my father got into a fight. My dad tried to kill my mom. He ends up stabbing her multiple times in the head, and
Dude,
yeah, so he went to prison after that. And I don't know how long he went to prison. I just never knew him growing up because I was about one or two when that happened. And there's a lot of stories that I've heard as of lately, actually, about this whole situation where I heard that there would be moments where, like when I was with the baby, 12 months old, and my mother was holding me one time, and apparently my father had gotten mad at her, threw a spice rack at her, and like broke this like spice rack over her back, because when he threw it, my mom was holding me, and so she turned and shielded herself away so that not to hurt me. And so
yeah,
my dad was a very violent young man, and abusive, I guess you could say, towards my mom, and ultimately almost killed her, tried to kill her. And so he went to prison. I grew up without him, not knowing really who he was. And growing up without a father, as you can imagine, is just a recipe for disaster for most people. And it was exactly that for me. At 5 years old, I was at a babysitter's house, and it was the babysitter that we would frequent. They had multiple children. One of the boys, who was a teenager, he was maybe 16, 17 years old. He eventually took advantage of the situation and began to molest me. And he would take me up into his bunk at night, and it was more of like an exposure kind of thing. He would look at me, I'd look at him. He would touch me, make me touch him. And it was very mild as far as like child molestation goes. But, it happened. It happened. I was about 5 years old. I don't really remember a lot of it. I just remember he looked so much different than I did. I was five, he was 16, 17 years old. So you can imagine. Um,
Sawyer's five. So yeah, that's terrifying, man.
right, right. I mean, I have two kids that are 7 and 5 now. And so I can't imagine, as we'll get into, some of the things that I went through and putting your children through those things. So when that happened, I did actually report that. I told my grandparents about it. His family was confronted. They denied it, which is pretty typical in these situations. They will deny these kind of things and say, my kid didn't do that or wouldn't do that. And then from there, you know, as at 5, 6, 7 years old, life wasn't like crazy yet. It was definitely getting out of hand. My mom was smoking weed all the time and drinking all the time. There was always people at our house. She was dating different guys, dating different men. So we would come home and there would be different men in the house. There would be holes in the walls, broken glass in the floor for where she had gotten into a fight with a man. And she would like talk about it braggadociously. Like she would brag to us about how, some man swung on her and missed, and she threw a glass at him, and we're just like little kids, and she was just doing, a poor job at parenting, and it is what it is. But that's just what was happening, and
I mean, what do you
as we
think of
started to
that
get
when you're a
old,
kid and you hear that sort of thing?
well,
I think that'd be hard to
it's
even comprehend.
right, yeah, it's hard to remember the specifics of that because it was so long ago, but I do remember like little bits and pieces of it. And as what this is called, it's called when parents are offloading so much like trauma or mental stress onto a child. It's called emotional incest is the term that's used. So basically, emotionally immature parents will offload their emotions onto their children, and in a way of making them grow up or making them understand or making them more mature or whatever it is. In reality, you're just breaking this child down. You're stressing this child out, and stress alone for extended periods of time for a young child is very detrimental to their health. And in fact, this all goes into the adverse childhood experience studies that they did back in the 80s or 90s, I believe. And it basically it stops your body from functioning the way it's supposed to function. So as a young child going through a lot of adversity, your body stops doing the things that it's supposed to do. Certain things stop growing, certain things, stop working, stop functioning the way they're supposed to function because your body is trying to adapt to this higher heightened level of stress or this continued level of stress, which this kind of explains why people like me, even though I'm a healthy man, I'm significantly more at risk for health conditions, heart conditions, lung conditions, whatever, all these health conditions purely because I grew up in a stressful environment, which is actually really crazy to think about.
It
Although
is.
nothing has ever happened to my body, like physically, that would be detrimental to my heart. Just the stress alone could have affected the way that my heart developed or my lungs developed or certain parts of my body developed. And you won't catch those things until you're an adult. And so there's a bunch of research and studies you can look up on these things. But yeah, people with adverse childhood experiences, high scores in that regard, they generally will have they're just so much more at risk for health conditions as an adult. So to answer your question, I don't recall the specific emotions and all that. It was obviously could have been very confusing to me as a young man. It's kind of scary, but reality is that my mom was just offloading a ton of stress onto her children, and she didn't know what she was doing either. Like most single parents
Right.
or most parents who didn't have good parents. My mom just did not have the tools to be a good person or mother, and there's a lot that you could say about that with accountability and but at the end of the day it's true. Some people just don't have the tools that they need to survive, and they're doing the best that they can, and sometimes that just does not look good. So that's kind of what was happening in my childhood, and so that's why my mom was smoking and drinking and doing the things she was doing. And because of all of those things and the added stress of life and whatever, as we got older things just continued to get more and more out of hand. So my mother my mother began to become more physically violent, emotionally violent. She was close hand punching us. She would grab us by the face and slam our heads into walls, yelling and screaming, threatening us. Excuse me. There would be I can remember being in the back of my mom's car. She was driving like a SUV at the time, and my sisters and I were in the back seat, and she was drunk driving, going down this small road, 25-mile-an-hour road. She was doing 45, 50 miles an hour, just speeding, flying down this road, yelling at her boyfriend in the passenger seat while my sisters and I were in the back screaming. And she turned around and yelled at us and told us she said, "Shut the fuck up. I'm going to kill us all. I'm going to kill us all." And she kept repeating it. And so you can imagine, 10 years, I was about 10 years old when that happened. And you're just sitting in the back of this car, you're with your sisters, you're just terrified, you're screaming, you're sweating, you're crying, and your mother, that's how she responds to you. And this was becoming more and more common. There was a time where she walked in my bedroom and beat my older sister, walked in the bedroom, punched her 4 or 5 times in the face, like hammer fist style, punching her in the face. I was watching my sister's head bounce off the wall. I broke down crying because I was terrified. And my mom looks at me and says, "What are you crying about? Stop crying before I give you something to cry about." And there were some other words she threw in there. And, and, a few weeks after that, there was like a moment where I got in trouble. And so my mom, she gave me a whooping with this wooden paddle. And the first time she hit me, I fell to my knees, and she kept swinging and she kept swinging, and she's hit me across the back with this wooden paddle like 4 or 5 times. And I'm on the ground screaming and crying, begging her to stop. And after all of that, instead of like apologizing or saying, "Hey, like this is why you got a whooping," whatever, after all that, her response was, "Get up and go to your room. Get out of my room. Get out of here." There was no like "I love you." There was no "I'm sorry." There was no explanation for why she did what she had done to me. And it was truly, it's heartbreaking, man. It's a heartbreaking childhood that I was enduring. And a lot of people, when they hear just those stories alone, they'll say, "Well, I got whooped too. It was the '70s, it was the '80s, it was the '90s. We all got whooped back in the day. Our parents all punched us or smacked us." And the reality of it is would you do that to your children today? Right? I've got a 5 and a 7-year-old, and I would never punch my child in the face. Like I would never beat my
Never
child
heard
with a
him.
board. Right? I would just, it's way out of line. And that further just validates the fact that so many of us were growing up in these kind of households and how detrimental it is. The fact that you wouldn't do that to your own children. So with all of that going on, I did what most boys do who do not have a father is I found love outside of the house. I found friends. There's usually drugs or gangs or violence. There's all kinds of things that young boys get into. I was getting into all of those things except for gangs. I was never gang affiliated or nothing like that, but I was getting in trouble. I was fighting people. I was running around doing stupid things. And in the midst of that, I had come across a kid named Jacob. For the sake of the story, I'll say his name's Jacob to protect his identity. And Jacob is 15 years old. I was 10 years old. And I had always found myself hanging out with older kids because they were bigger, they could protect me. There was a lot of things that were there. They have access to more things that I did. And so I hung out with Jacob, and Jacob and I became best friends
Did
very quickly.
best friends, did he fill any sort of like fatherly or masculine role that you were lacking, do you think? Or
He
anything like that?
was he was very much like a father, like big brother
Older
role to
brother?
me. Yeah. Yeah, he was. That's exactly like the role that he had filled. I didn't have a positive role model in my life, and he was. And Jacob was a good kid. I mean, he was a great kid. He was a smart kid. He was not he wasn't getting in trouble. So when I started to hang out with him, I stopped, running around the streets at night. I stopped doing stupid things, and I was just with Jacob, and Jacob took care of me. And he fed me, and he knew that my life at home was a little jacked up, and so he took special care of me. And after knowing him for a few months, I'm over at his house one day, and this man walks in the front door. This man is in his 30s. I didn't know it at the time. I knew he was a grown man, but he was about 30 years old. And he walks in. He's this massive guy. He's like 6'6", 380 pounds. He's Hispanic, but you can he's very pale. He's very pale, but you can tell he's Hispanic. He's got the big like aviator Dahmer style glasses on, long black slick back hair, just a massive dude. Looks like a left tackle, like for football.
Yeah.
And he walks in and he introduced himself to me. He says, "Hey, my name is Mondo. What's your name?" I'm Seth. He's like, "Do you like football?" "I love football." "Do you love pizza?" "I love pizza." "Do you love video games?" "I love video games." So he's like, "Well, hey, why don't you come up to my house this weekend with me and hang out with Jacob and I, and we'll play video games, eat pizza, drink pop." So I'm like, "All right, sick. Let me go ask my mom." My mom said, "As long as I'm with Jacob, I'm good to go." So I go back, I get into his car. He takes us to a fast food restaurant nearby, big place in our hometown, and I get whatever I want on the menu. And I get like a large meal, large drink, large fries, dessert, whatever. Get whatever I want. I'm like, this is awesome. I'm in the back of the car. We're driving up to Bluffton, Ohio, and it's about a 30-minute drive. We're listening to like AC/DC, Metallica, we're rocking out, and I'm thinking to myself, like, dude, this is sick, man. I've got my friend Jacob, and I've got this new best friend Mondo who can drive and has money, and like my life is I have an escape. I have an escape from the hell that I was living in at home, right? I was very excited. We get up to Mondo's house. We start playing video games. There's multiple TVs. There's multiple game systems. We don't have to take turns. Late at night comes around and Mondo orders pizza. He's got a refrigerator full of pop. We're drinking energy drinks, pop, coffee, eating a bunch of pizza, and it was amazing. And I'm playing video games. I didn't go to sleep. I literally did not go to sleep. I played video games all night long. You know, morning time comes around. Mondo takes us back home the next day, and he asked us, well, when do you want to? He asked me, he's like, well, when do you want to come back? And I'm like, I'll come back next weekend. Like I'll be back here next weekend if you want. And he's like, all right, cool. And so Mondo, he worked Monday through Friday. And so what would happen from this, basically from this point forward, is every Friday I'd get off from school, and Mondo would come and pick me up. And so he would come pick me up Friday nights or Saturday mornings really early, and then I would start going to his house. And after some time, maybe a month or two, I started going up there by myself. And I don't know if it was my mom stopped asking, or if I was lying. I can't remember how all that happened, but I started going up to his house by myself literally every single weekend, like clockwork. Even on like Thanksgiving, Memorial Day, Fourth of July's, these long holiday weekends, I would go and hang out with him. And in fact, I would go and see his family. I would go meet his mother. I met his sisters. I met his nieces, his nephews. And so Mondo was this man in his 30s showing up to family events with this random little boy who actually looked like a little girl. So I had long hair, like really long hair down to my shoulders, and I did look like a little girl. I was oftentimes confused for being a girl in class, and whenever we had like a substitute teacher or something. And what's the reason why I always point that out is because when I first met his mother, Mondo's mother, his mother told me that I was too pretty to be a boy,
It's
and
kind
we
of a weird
laughed.
thing to say.
It is, and we laughed about it, and you kind of whatever, you just kind of like kept moving. Well, about 3 months into knowing Mondo, I was up at his house one weekend, and Jacob was actually with me. Jacob leaves for a moment to go get some tacos, and I was there alone with Mondo, which was not unusual. And I was cold, and so Mondo said, "Well, if you're cold, why don't you come up and sit on my lap?" And I get up and I sit on his left leg, and he's got his left hand on my left hip, and he had these massive hands, and you know, basically his hand slips off of my hip, brushes my butt, and he apologizes. And I said, "Hey, it's not a big deal. Like I attributed it to me and you bumping each other in the hallway. It's okay. Sometimes those things happen." And he said, "Oh, that's okay." And so he puts his hand back on my butt and he said, "That's okay." And in that moment, I knew what was happening. Like I was just so aware. I was 10 years old. I remember I just know I'm like, okay, this is not good. Like I know what he's doing. I'm not dumb. Like I know what's happening. And despite knowing what was happening and being absolutely convinced of what he was trying to do, and knowing all the things that I should have done, I should have gotten up, I should have ran, I should have told somebody, I should have, all these other things I should have, could have, would have done. I sat there and I just let it happen. Like most people do, I froze. And when you freeze in those moments, it's almost like giving them consent. Not for me, but to them, it's like giving them consent. It's like, oh, he's okay with me touching him, right? And he knows it's wrong. I know it's wrong, but in his mind, that's what they do. They're just like, he has given me the consent to touch him right now. He's not going to do anything about this. And a few minutes later, Jacob shows back up with the tacos. He moves his hand out the way. We eat the tacos, we go home. And when we go home, I do what most people do in this situation is I gaslight myself. I tell myself that didn't happen. That's not, he wasn't being weird. He was just resting his hand. I was telling myself all these lies to validate and to justify going back to his house the next weekend because he had pizza, he had pop, he had video games, and there was safety, there was security. And what makes this like just even more, this is like straight out of a movie, you would think. Because my home life, what makes this so just crazy and so coincidental was that my home life was getting further and further out of control. Around 10 years old, when I had first met Mondo, my mother had got a new boyfriend and was getting heavily addicted into crack and cocaine. So not only was she abusive and violent at home, now she was getting into hard drugs. So we had multiple people in our house, 10, 15, 20 people a day would come in, they would get high, they would smoke. They would be passed out in our living room. My own mother was, one of those people, and they would be in the bathroom for like 8 hours getting high. And so we're exposed to all of this like insanity and just this toxic environment at home. And I lived in a house with a bedroom that had a hole in the ceiling. I slept exposed to the elements of the Ohio winters, like just the wind, the rain, the cold, the snow. It was miserable. And I was contemplating suicide. I was just in a very deep depressive state. And so I needed I needed somewhere to go on the weekends. I needed to get out of that environment on the weekends. And so Mondo's house was my only escape. I was leaving one hell and going to what would eventually be another. And as you can imagine, over the next, 6 years, basically, I I kept going back to Mondo's house, and Mondo slowly and methodically, strategically, however you want to say it, began to just round the bases as far as child molestation goes. So it went from him touching me to him putting his hand in my shorts and my pants to me laying in the bed with him to being completely naked with him to every single sexual act that you can do to one another. By the time I was 12 years old, had been done on multiple occasions between Mondo and I. He had done horrific things to me, and he had convinced me to reciprocate those acts to him. And it's absolutely mortifying and terrifying and disgusting. There's no words for the things that I was going through. And after about 3 years of all of that, my mother, I was coming home from his house one weekend, and my mother had gotten into a fight with her boyfriend, her current boyfriend, who had gotten her addicted to drugs. And she had stabbed him in the bathroom a few times over some drugs or something like that, set some things on fire in the front yard. I saw this happen in front of me, 12 years old, and there's a fire, there's the police, they show up, they grab my mom, they throw her in the back of the car. I'm screaming and crying and begging for them to not take my mom. Long story short, there is my mom gets taken away to jail. My sisters and I, we go to live with my dad. I get into a bunch of trouble, so I left my dad's house and I
So
kept
your dad's out
bounced.
of prison?
Yeah, he was out
Is
of
that what we're
prison.
saying?
Yeah. hmm And
Okay.
and to be honest, I hadn't seen it. I don't even know the first time I had seen him previous to this. He just like randomly showed up. I have no idea how he was even contacted, but he was contacted. He showed up. Picks up my sisters and I. I lived with him for about a month, and then I left, and I kept bouncing around different houses. I was 12 years old. I was bouncing around house to house, living with just random people for a few months before I ended up at my grandparents' house. And my grandparents, they got a hold of me around the Christmas time of when I had turned 12. And I get to my grandparents' house and they asked to adopt me. I said, yes, I want you to adopt me. I don't want to go back and live with my mom. And so they start the adoption process. Well, when that all starts, I tell my grandparents I have this friend that I want to go hang out with. Like I have this friend who I hang out with every weekend. And they asked who it is. I said, well, his name's Mondo. He's, this guy. He's 32, 33 years old by this point. And my grandparents are immediately like, nope, we're not doing this. And I did, once again, what most people do in these situations is I defend the abuser. I defend the situation. I defend the circumstances. I lie and hide all of the, excuse me, all of the abuse and all of the things that he was doing to me because I was so just manipulated. I was so just torn apart. And so I go back to his house and I keep going back to his house. Around the time I was 13 years old,
All right. So you're lying to the grandparents now. And by the way, is it your mom's parents or your dad's? And you're just
uh,
lying to them to be able to hang out there, or
yeah, basically
saying you're
it
going
was.
somewhere else?
Well, no, I was going to his house. I probably could have been a little bit more clear right there. It's my dad's parents. I tell my grandparents that there's
Okay.
nothing wrong with him, and so they say, "Well, we want to meet him." And so he comes to my grandparents' house. and he makes my grandparents laugh, and now he's in the door. Now he's like good to go. He made my grandparents laugh. He's like, "Yep, I'm Seth's friend. We've been friends for this long. I know he had a rough life living with his mom, and I'm just trying to help him out. We just play video games and we just hang out on the weekends." And so my grandparents, trying probably to do the best that they could for me, they say, "Okay, you can go to his house." And so I continue going back to his house. And what's interesting too about this is now instead of me going to Mondo's family events, Mondo was coming to my family events. So now I was no longer really seeing him much of his family, but he was seeing all of my grandparents' side of the family on Christmas, on Thanksgiving, holidays, whatever.
Wow.
And yeah, and nobody ever said anything. Like nobody ever like put their foot down. Like there were certainly people that like raised concerns, I'm sure, behind closed doors and all that. But nobody really put their foot down and was like, "Hey, this has to stop. Like he cannot be hanging out with an adult." Um, and people they just let me go. And I don't blame them for it. I just now I know better. But and it just continued to happen. And as around the age of 13, Mondo finally convinces me to do basically the ultimate deed of what he had wanted to do the entire time, which he eventually rapes me when I was 13 years old. I remember everything about that. I remember everything about that moment. I'll spare you the details for now. But it was a horrific moment and just absolutely horrifying. And I remember after it was done, I was sitting in his bathroom, I was sitting on his toilet, and I was just crying because I was so mad at the world. Like, why is all this happening to me? I don't have a mom, I don't have a father. This guy has been molesting me, and now he's finally raped me. I was so terrified to report. I was so scared to report because I was scared that people would think I was gay, or that they would think that there was something wrong with me, or that I had HIV or AIDS or some sort of crazy disease. I would have nightmares of reporting him and then going to the hospital and seeing the paperwork that says like HIV positive. I would have these like vivid nightmares of these things. And so I was sitting there crying, and I wiped away my tears. I put a smile on, and I walked back out in the room, and I played video games and I ate pizza. And that was what I did. And I just kept like fighting to survive for another day. I was just surviving like day by day, meal by meal, moment by moment, and just slowly getting through life, just kind of wondering when it was all going to end. I was
And what was your grandparents' house like? Because your mom sounded like just so terrible for someone to experience that as a young kid. Not even hardly a roof, and then you have your dad's bouncing on people's couches at 12, which I don't think very many people experience that until they're at least an adult. I mean, that's a lot, man. But was your grandparents' house like normal at all?
Yeah, my grandparents were very like a very normal standard American house. Like just it was just
Okay.
me and them, home cooked meals every day. Home life was absolutely peaceful. It was great. My grandparents were phenomenal. They were the blessing, the people that I needed at the most. Unfortunately, there were still so many things that were going on with me. And so um, I kept going back to his house, and like I said, this went on for about 6 years. So about halfway through, I left my mom's house. I went to my grandparents' house, and it continues on for another 3 years. And basically, what happens is, I was up at his house one weekend, and I had a younger friend that was with me, and this younger friend was having a bad day, and Mondo makes a comment towards this younger friend, and he says to him, "If you're having a bad day, I could take you back into bed and I can blow you." Is what he says to my younger friend. And we all laughed it off in the room, but I knew what was happening. Like I knew he was not joking. I knew what his intent was. And the reason why this is such a striking moment in this whole story is because Mondo would say those same exact things about me in front of other adults. We had other adult friends that we would hang out with on the weekends. And when we were at their houses, Mondo would tell them, like, "Hey, we got to go because Seth is going to do this tonight, or I'm going to go back and do this tonight to Seth." And at 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years old, I know that like that's actually going to happen to me, but everybody in the room is just laughing it off. Like Mondo would
Yeah.
never say
Under
that, right?
they completely thought he was just joking. Like that's
Yeah,
so messed
yeah.
up.
Exactly. And so they and like why would he wouldn't tell on himself in front of people? Like you're obviously not going to tell somebody that you're abusing a child, right? Like that's just you wouldn't do that. And so that's just a tactic that they use just to hide in plain sight. And he was just making these sick, twisted jokes, and they were so far out of line. I don't know how they people just didn't say something. Nonetheless, he made that comment about my friend, and at that moment, I know this is going to sound like I don't know, maybe crazy, but this at that moment, I said to myself, like, this is it. I'm not letting this happen anymore. I could handle the abuse, I could handle the trauma, I could handle all of those things, but I could not stomach to see my friend go through what I had gone through. I knew how I felt. I knew I did not want my friend to go through those things. And so that weekend, I go home and I make a. I call my friend Jacob, who introduced me to Mondo. Well, Jacob was in college at this point, and so Jacob hadn't hung out with us for a couple of years. And I call Jacob, and Jacob comes over, and I'm telling Jacob, I'm saying, hey, I've been wanting to tell you this for a long time, and I'm kind of pacing back and forth in my bedroom, and I can't get the story out because I'm just terrified. Like I'm scared of rejection, I'm scared of denial, I'm scared of so many things. Like what if they don't believe me? And I literally cannot say it. And Jacob breaks the silence and he says, Mondo touched you, didn't he? And I fell apart. I fell apart, man. I fell to the floor, screaming and crying. I was punching the floor. Just 16 years of raw emotion were just pouring out of my body. Like the absolute worst thing that a child can go through was just all of it was coming out of me at one time. And after a few moments, Jacob breaks the silence again and he says, well, he did it to me too. And when he did that, I turn and I look at him and I'm blown away. I can't believe that this happened to him. I believe him, but I can't believe it because Jacob he's a man. He's like my big brother slash like father figure. Like he's my best friend. He's so strong. He's stoic. He doesn't have emotion. Like it just doesn't happen to that person. Like if you have a father or if you have a brother or the most manly guy you can think of, like that's who Jacob was to me. He was the toughest freaking nail in the shed. And so there's no way it happened to him, and I couldn't believe it. And so I at that moment it was no longer about me. I just felt horrible for him. Again, I felt bad for my friend. And Jacob says to me, he says, well, Seth, if you want to report him, we can report him. Or if you want to keep it a secret, we'll keep it a secret. Whatever you want to do, I'll follow your lead. And I tell Jacob, I said, fuck this. We're going to report this guy. I said, he's about to start abusing my younger friend who Jacob knew. And I said, well, I'm not letting this happen to anybody else. And so Jacob's like, all right, let's go. So we go out, we tell my grandparents. My grandparents are, as you can imagine, just absolutely destroyed. We call 911. We go down to the hospital. We get down there. We do um, the whole rape kit, talking to the police officer. They're going through all the steps and everything. And what was really incredible about this moment too was that Mondo had actually raped me that weekend again. And I knew when he did that I was not going to shower. I wasn't going to change my clothes. I wasn't going to. I needed it because I knew I was going to get him. I knew I was going to report him, and that was going to be the end of it. And so I went home that weekend and did all the reporting. I didn't take a shower, and I showed up at the hospital, and the nurses are asking me, they're like, hey, Seth, when was the last time you were at his house? Like, do you have any dirty clothes? Do you have anything in your dirty clothes basket that we can use to check for DNA? And I told them, I said, he just did this to me like 12 hours ago, and I haven't showered and I haven't changed. And the nurse, she got down on a knee. I'll never forget this. And she put her hand on my leg and she looked at me like eye to eye and she said, Seth, you are incredible. Like she's like, you are an absolute hero. You're a warrior. She said, what you've done is incredible. You should be so proud of yourself. And it really was a very special moment because I knew the importance of what I had done. I knew the gravity of the situation. And to wrap it all up, basically what happened is the officer who was there, his name's Chad Couples, he gets all of his notes, he drives up to Bluffton, Ohio, he finds Mondo, takes him down to the police station. He gets Mondo to confess. Out, he wasn't in custody, so he gets an out of custody confession from Mondo. And, you know, Mondo eventually gets charged with 11 felony counts of child like misconduct and things like that. He's offered a plea deal. So Mondo was offered a plea deal. He takes 4 of the 11 counts. He gets sentenced to 10 years in prison for about 10 years of abuse between me and Jacob. And that was in 2011. In 2019, this is, 8, 9 years after the fact. I was in Afghanistan. I was in the army. I was in Afghanistan on a deployment, and I got a text from my wife saying that Mondo died in prison. And so he died about a year, 6 months to a year before he was supposed to be released. So that was the end of his story in 2019. As far as my story goes, I reported to him. I kept moving through life. I never went to
But what
therapy.
did that
I never.
what does that feel like though? Finding out he
What do you-
died. I mean, it was is there like this is a messed up question, but I'm just as a friend. I mean, is there some sort of relief in that, or is there some sort of guilt in that? I mean, I just can't. That just seems like a lot, one way or another. That seems like a hard thing.
Yeah, it's hard to say how I would feel if he didn't die because he died, and so you know I knew he was going to be released from prison. I knew that he'd be free one day, and those things never bothered me. Like I didn't
Okay.
care about him. It didn't bother me a bit. Like, well, the fact that he was going to be free, maybe, I don't think it bothered me. The whole situation of what happened was certainly affecting me as a young man and as an adult. But the reality of the fact that he might be free one day just it never crossed my mind. Really, I didn't really think about it much. But when my wife told me that he died, I just didn't care. I was just like, all right, whatever. Like, all right, like this has no impact on me. Whether he lives or dies has no impact. And I wasn't like cheering for him and like, man, I hope he goes to hell, or I hope he got
Yeah,
what
yeah,
was coming for him. Like I didn't have any of these like crazy feelings like that. And it's a great question. And I get asked this all the time. This is the question I get asked all the time. But what I love about this is it gives me the opportunity to explain to you and to other people out there is that if you carry these negative thoughts for the people that hurt you, you will never get over them. You will never get over that situation. So many people they want justice, or they want death, or they want torture, or they want pain and suffering for the person that hurt them. And you can't do anything about that. You can't do that unless you go do it yourself, and then you're just going to put yourself in a bigger hole, right? So if you can't control any of that, then there's no sense in you being upset about it. There's no sense in you stressing about it. There's no sense in you talking about it. I mean, there's no sense in me sitting here thinking, I wish he would have gotten what he gotten. I wish he would have got what he did to other people, right? We can talk about those things, but it's just negativity. You understand? It's not a
right.
positive
Totally.
thing, right? It's not something that's going to help you heal. Me fantasizing about him going through pain and suffering is not going to help me get past the amount of pain and suffering that he put me through. So I love when I get asked this question because it gives me the opportunity to talk about that. Is like letting people know that it does not matter how much justice you get. It does not matter what happens to that person, whether they're convicted, they walk free, they die a horrible death, or they live a prosperous life. Those things do not matter to you anymore because they are out of your life, right? You cannot let that person and things that are outside of your control dictate your feelings, your emotions, your reactions. You have to be able to say, you know what? It is what it is. These horrible things happen. I did the best that I could with what I had. It is my time now to move on. And that's what I did. And that's what I encourage everybody to do in these kind of situations. So that's how I felt when he died. And that's how I feel about that whole situation of justice and punishment and conviction and whatever. So just to kind of wrap up my part of the story, and then we can get into whatever you want to get into. I never went to therapy. I never saw a doctor. I never really did anything crazy. I just kind of like packed up my shit and kept moving. And it's not the recommended route by any means. Um, I just was a stubborn young kid. I was also very smart, very charismatic, I was a social butterfly. I was the straight A student, so nobody around me knew what was going on. Even after I reported, nobody knew what happened to me. I graduated high school. I joined the army. I served in the army for 9 years. While I was in the army, I met my wife, had both my children, traveled the world, been to a bunch of different countries, couple deployments. I got out of the army. I got into the construction industry. I won some national awards in the construction industry, which is actually kind of what propelled me into the speaking realm. When I started winning these awards, people wanted to know more about me. I won these awards. They asked me, hey, would you come and speak to these different colleges and these different classrooms and just kind of explain how you did what you did? And so I would do that a little bit. But I would never tell anybody about the sexual abuse side of my story. I would just tell them that I grew up in a bad place with a bunch of bad things happening. And I kind of explained how I climbed the ranks in the construction industry. So my professional life really took off after the military, and it still is doing very well. But even since then, I have found a calling to go out and to do things that I would call chosen suffering or deliberate discomfort. I do these things because they are intentional efforts at getting better, becoming stronger, becoming more mentally fit, resilient, tougher, disciplined, all of the things that I want to be. I chose a certain path to get to where I'm at. That path included running 7 ultra marathons in 9 months to include a 100-mile race. I started competing in jiu-jitsu. I started winning jiu-jitsu tournaments. I started writing a book. I wrote a book, and my book, Strength Beyond the Shadows, which, shameless plug right here.
It's
Um,
a great book.
yeah, man. So this is on Amazon now, and it's an Amazon bestseller, and so it's been a bestseller multiple times in multiple categories. I um, yeah, I started to accomplish a bunch of things because I knew that for my story to mean something, I would have to win. I would have to be a champion. I would have to become something that could be inspired, upon, right? We don't go to the person who's homeless under the bridge for inspiration. They may have a hell of a story, but it's not inspiring. It's just not. And to me, in my opinion, and the people that inspire me, they do what I do, right? The people that I look at, there's a reason why I do what I do now. There's a reason why I live the life that I live now is because I want other people to look at me and say, okay, if this guy who's just like me comes from where I come from, has gone through all the same things or worse, then I can also get to wherever he is at, and which is an absolute fact because there's nothing special about me. I work hard and I'm very disciplined, and that is it. At the bare bones minimum, that is it. I'm just a hardworking, disciplined man who wants to show the world that you can overcome a lot of horrific moments with just a little bit of hard work and discipline. So that's my story in a nutshell. I know there's a ton of questions, or we can get into whatever you want to talk about now, but that's who I am. I know that kind of was like a long winded answer.
It was a wonderful answer, man. I appreciate you, being so vulnerable and explaining all that. I think your words of wisdom, of stoicism, focusing on what you can control are so important for life to have a meaningful, happy life. And it's just awesome you were able to do that on your own. I'm curious about quite a few things, of course. The first one being, what made you join the army?
So initially, it was for two reasons. One, because I thought if I put a uniform on, girls would come chasing me, which is not entirely true.
you said
Uh,
you said you met your wife. I don't know.
Oh yeah, that's true. Maybe 60 years ago it was like that, but nowadays it's not as much of a big deal. But really, it was more of a. It's interesting you asked that too because in running these ultra marathons and now I compete in powerlifting. I'm getting into competitive powerlifting, becoming a best-selling author, jiu-jitsu husband, father, veteran. These are all things, these are all titles that I have earned, right? These are all titles that I live with that I'm proud of, right? I am not Seth, the childhood trauma survivor. I'm not Seth, the childhood
No,
sexual abuse survivor, right? I am Seth, the ultra running, best selling author, speaker, freaking power lifter, I am all these other beautiful things, combat veteran.
that's right.
I'm all these things. And that was part of it. I don't think I realized it at the time. Maybe I did a little bit, but I wanted to do something that was honorable, right? I wanted to do something that I could be proud of. I wanted to do a level of suffering that was important and like respectable. I think that's what I wanted. And so when I put that uniform on, I went through basic training, I did all the things. I could tell people I was in the military and they would have a different like level of respect for me. And that's what I got. That's what I wanted. So that's exactly why I joined.
That's amazing, man. Yeah, thank you for your service. I think it's super cool, that you did that. You got to travel, meet your wife. What's your best piece of advice for being married, and what's it like to be a dad? And what's it mean to you? One thing I wanted to say because you mentioned it at the very beginning of this, you said like, oh, like I grew up without a dad, so likelihood of all these problems. And it just made me think of something as when there was a period of time, as you know, where I didn't get to meet my son, and I would just listen to this song on repeat. It was "Father of Mine" by Everclear. It's like it's all about like it's like my daddy
Yeah,
gave me a name, and then he walked away, and I would just listen to that song and just be like, Sawyer's never gonna effing feel like that. Like
right.
Sawyer's never gonna feel like that. And I don't know. Just when you said that, that's what I thought of. I don't know if I wanted to tell you that or ask you that or what, but I wanted to tell you that.
Dude, that's it's awesome, man. I mean,
Yeah.
that's exactly how I feel, man. Like when I see my kids, I'm like, dude, my kids will never know what it's like to grow up like I did. They will never know what it's like to like not have their dad there. As much as I possibly can be, which
Yeah.
I make every single event that I can make, which is pretty much all of them. My kids will never know what it's like to go without the support, of a parent or especially of a father. No matter what happens in this life, my children will always have my support, um, and doing the right things. So yeah, I mean, I think as a father, as a parent, my advice would be understanding your responsibility as a parent. You are the most important thing for that child, and especially nowadays where there's so much where you can like put in front of a child and other people are parenting your children, babysitters and daycares and technology and whatever. There's like all of these other avenues of parenting other than the parent just taking care of their freaking child. And there are some situations, I get it, single parents, whatever. There are some circumstances that call for these outside sources to help you do what you got to do, right? Totally understand it. But when you have the moment to be that parent, you have got to be the parent. And there's so many people, I see it all the time, man. I see it all the time. Single parent, well, hey, I got to get out. I got to enjoy myself sometimes. I got to have my own vacation. I got to have my little alone time. I. It's all they're saying, right? They're not
Yep.
worried about the child. And your child is the most important thing, man. Like you've got to make sure they're good to go. You've got to spend time with them. You've got to talk to them. We make an effort every single night, pretty much not, I can't say every single night, but I would say 90, 80% of the time we are at the dinner table with a 5 and a 7-year old having full conversations with them. It's not like shut up. It's not like, hey, mommy, daddy are talking. They got something to say. It's like, hey, 1 second, we're talking. And then we always go to them, hey, what do you got to say? What's up? We go to restaurants. It's the same thing. My kids are not sitting at the restaurant with a tablet in front of their face, not part of the family unit. Okay. They are part of the family unit. My children will never experience that. They will never be pushed to the corner to be alone and to be sheltered or to be isolated, excuse me, and be away from us. So as a parent, like I think, man, take that thing serious, man. Like take it, it's like a you go to work and you work 12 hours a day or 8 hours a day. Why? So you don't get fired, right? Like you don't want to lose your job. Okay, well, as a parent, if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to lose your child. You're going to lose them when they're an adult, or you're going to lose them to drugs, or you're going to lose them to violence. If you don't treat that child with the utmost importance, you are going to lose them. And I think your marriage is very much the same thing. I think as far as marriage goes, I think there's two things that I would say probably the most important. Anytime I see anybody who's been married more than a couple of years, I always think to myself, how many times have they forgiven each other? How many times have they apologized and forgiven each other? And then how much like grace has been in that relationship? How many times has one person let the other person down, or one person comes in a little upset, or one person, is not feeling their best, or whatever, and they give each other grace and they just keep fighting for each other. And today's society, especially I would say with women, there's so much pride and ego with if your man does not do XYZ, you need to leave him. If your man is doing these certain things, you need to leave him. Versus, look, man, y'all agreed to get married, and I'm not saying that you have to be together forever. If it's not going to work, go ahead, get your divorce, move on, right? But if you got married, you're coming together, you had a child, whatever, and you dedicated your life to do this thing together, you're going to make mistakes. You both are going to make mistakes. You're going to do stupid shit. You're going to piss each other off. So you should have more pride in being kind and forgiving and having grace than you should for being so cold-hearted to one another. But in the world we live in, you know, it's women take so much pride in this cold-hearted arrogance of like, I don't need a man. I don't need a man. And it's a shame because as a man, we are just naturally we are dependent upon for so many things in the world. And we operate a certain way, women operate a certain way, and I think it takes a man and a woman to come together and to say, "Hey, you do this, I do this. I'm good at this, you're good at that. I'm bad at this, like you're bad at that. Like let's work together and figure this thing out." Versus just throwing up the fence and saying, "You know what? If you don't like it, you can leave," you know? So I guess there's my 2 cents on parenting and and marriage.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. There's definitely a beautiful dichotomy between men and women that's natural. We work together well. I hope that society can, start getting back to more, I guess I'll call it traditional values and really not giving up on each other, practicing grace and forgiveness, like you're saying. It's just sad to see a 50% or higher divorce rate. And, kids really need their parents, like you said. So, okay, ultra marathons. That sounds very far. I ran 2 days ago with my friend who does that sort of thing. Made me run 7 miles. I usually run like three. It was hard. So, how do you run 7D or however many?
Yeah, so I ran a couple 30-mile races, a 40, a 50, a 60, and then a 100 miler. Um, yeah, man. Honestly, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a program. I didn't have like preparation. Like whenever I talk about running, people always tell me, I'm doing a 5K, or I'm doing a 10K, or I'm doing a half, or I'm doing a marathon. And I
Yeah,
always ask them like, "Oh, when are you going to do it?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. I'm just kind of getting ready for it. I don't know yet." Or they're like, "Oh, it's in 6 months or it's in a year. I'm doing it next year. I just haven't picked it yet. I don't know when I'm going to do it." And when I made the decision that I was going to run an ultra marathon, it was literally just a on a whim. I was just like, I saw my buddy do it, and I was like, okay, I'll run one by the end of the year. And this was in September. I saw him run a 100-mile race in September, and I said, by the end of the year, I'll run an ultra marathon. And 2 weeks later, I ran an ultra marathon. Okay. So I did this on like 2, 3 weeks of prep, went out and ran a 30-mile race. I did another one 2 weeks later, did another one 2 weeks later. That was when I did my 50 miler. Then I waited like a month or two, and then I banged out the last three or three or four that I did. Um, I didn't, I'm not a runner. I'm not built like a runner. I am built much like a weightlifter, power lifter. I have that build. Um, but to go and run, how do you run? How do you run 100 miles? 1 mile at a time, one step at a time. That's just it. Can you take it or not? That's basically it.
love it. It's definitely all in your mind.
Right. And that's what I tell everybody. It's a mental thing, man. Like after you get past 10, 15, 20 miles, it's all in your head from that point forward. It's like, do you want to be here or not? Which is exactly why I went and did it. That's exactly why I ran the 100 miler, was because I needed to do something that would show people that this is not, this doesn't require some physical specimen. You don't have to be special to do this. You don't have to be special to write a book. You don't have to be special to do anything that I've done because I'm not special. I'm very average as far as like any kind of natural level or talent goes. What is unnatural or maybe above average about me is that I will put my head down and work my ass off to accomplish what I think needs to be done.
It's incredible, man. I'm so stoked to have met you. I remember when we met at Amfest, it was just like, I don't know, we just hit it off. It was really cool. And I'm just stoked on what you do. Jiu-jitsu. What's cool to you about jiu-jitsu? I think we both wrestled in high school, if I recall correctly.
Right. Yeah. So, jiu-jitsu was really my first thing that I started doing as an adult to get back into competing. I wanted to do something that was competitive, and I came across jiu-jitsu not really knowing what it was. Walked into a gym, started training, and jiu-jitsu is like beautiful for many reasons. I think when you run, your mind is on so many different things. You're thinking about so much going on, and sometimes that's a good thing. For me, it was a good thing sometimes. It was like a good creative time for me. But in jiu-jitsu, your mind is focused on one thing. It's just get this person off of me, you know. or do whatever technique you're doing. That your mind is focused on one thing. That is the beautiful thing about jujitsu, is that whatever else is going on in the world right now, you have no idea because you are focused on your task at hand. You have to be, otherwise you just get crushed. And that was like the immediate thing I recognized. But I loved the struggle. I loved the fight. I loved the adversity. I loved like the the discomfort. I don't want to say pain because it sounds like I want to get hurt, but I loved the discomfort. I loved like being tired and being exhausted and fighting and winning. I loved losing. I loved the entire process of being in the gym and becoming a more, humble person, a more capable person. There's so much beauty in jujitsu. It's amazing. And there's actually a really good quote from a book. It's called Breathe. It's by Hickson Gracie. And he talks about sometimes in jujitsu, it's not about the escape, it's not about the win, it's not about the victory. Sometimes when you're getting choked out and somebody's got you in a rear naked choke, so many times in life when like you're about to go out, you're about to give up, you're about to quit, all we're thinking about is escaping. We're just thinking like, man, I just want to get out of here. I want to get away from this. I want to run. I want to be free. I want to live, whatever it is. And that is just not on that's not on the table right now, right? What you have to do is make these little minor adjustments so you can keep breathing. You understand? When somebody's choking you out, sometimes it's not about escaping. Sometimes it's just, all right, if I turn my head just a little bit this way, I can still breathe. If I turn my head a little bit back this way, I can still breathe. And as long as you can keep fighting, you will eventually escape. You will eventually get out of whatever situation it is that you're in. And when I started training jujitsu, I came across that and that idea, that mentality, and it's such a testament to my life, man. I wanted to escape so much of my life, and all I did was I kept fighting for another breath. You know, understand what I'm saying? I kept going. I kept just turning my head just a little bit. All right, let me get through this. Another day, another moment, another meal, another moon, another sunrise. Just keep fighting just a little bit, and you can survive. And so, I know this is like all like super deep and analytical and like philosophical, but this is just how my brain operates, and that's really like it really is like when I go and do things like this, like it is like that. And I know for some people, jujitsu is just like, yeah, I just want to go have fun and do jujitsu, and that's fine. For me, though, it was such this like deeper level to it all, which it is to a lot of people.
Yeah, jujitsu is incredible. Got my kid in it. I'm in it. It's definitely something that'll open your eyes in life, I think, quite a lot. There's something about, you know, whether you're in control or you're being choked, just having that constant possibility, we'll call it, definitely changes you. So I think that's really great you're doing that. I hope you get your kids involved. And powerlifting. Why powerlifting? What made you get into that?
Yeah, so kind of the same thing as everything else in a way.
You're
I've always
just
been a gym.
David Goggins in everything, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
white, the white David Goggins.
Yeah,
I'm just
no, dude, I've heard that so many times. I've heard that
really
so many times.
good.
Yeah, which I'm okay with. To me, that's a badass title. I'll take the white David Goggins all day. I read his book, and his book was a life-changing book
Me
as
too.
well. So, yeah, powerlifting. So the gym has always been like my first love. I started lifting weights 12 years ago ish, 12, 15 years ago, and it's always been my first love. I've always wanted to do bodybuilding or powerlifting. I've always been obsessed with the scene. I love it. I love working out. I love the idea of what people can do with their bodies. And I've just never pulled the trigger on doing powerlifting or bodybuilding out of like fear. And I've been doing jujitsu now for a couple of years, and I came across a organization who's a partner company, I believe, to one of my mentors. But I came across this company. It's called Modern Athlete Strength Systems, and I hit them up and I said, "Hey, do you guys do one-on-one coaching? I want to compete in powerlifting." And they said yes. So I got on a call with them, met one of the coaches, met another guy on the team, and we hit it off. And I was just like, "Yeah, let's do this." And so now I am starting my competitive powerlifting career. In fact, I am going to my first meet this weekend in Tennessee, and I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm going to go up there. I'm going to squat, bench, and deadlift. I'm going to do my absolute best, and it's going to be the learning experience, right? But truly, I mean, it's what, July right now. By the end of the year, I really do want to have some serious numbers. By the end of next year, I really want to be like ultra competitive within the world of powerlifting, and those are my goals right now. I'm throwing that out in the universe, and hopefully it lands on a wall somewhere, so that in 6 months from now you can't come back to this podcast and be like, "Hey Seth, you were full of shit." So I will put up some serious numbers eventually. I don't know how long it's going to take, whether it's a year or 2 years or 3 years, but I will do it. I'll do it the right way, and it was just something that I wanted to. It's been a first love. It's another community that I can reach. It's another thing that I can go and do that I think is impressive. That people can look at me and be like, "Damn!" Once again, like if he can do it, then I can do it, and if I can do it, then anybody can do it. Truly.
Exactly. You're gonna kill it, man. That's awesome. I want to ask you about one of your mentors, the one you told me about. I believe he was a Green Beret. He wrote the forward in your book or something like that. And yeah, I just want to know why he means so much to you, how you guys met, and what that relationship's been like.
Yeah, so Nick Lavery is who you're talking about. He is a active duty Green Beret still. He is an amputee. He lost his leg in a firefight, I believe in 2015, something like that. Lost his leg in a firefight. What's incredible about his story, and you can Google him, he's told the story a million times, but I believe it goes something like this, where when he was in the hospital and they took his leg finally, they finally eventually amputated his leg completely. And Michelle Obama shows up and he is like high on ketamine. He's like just out of this world from all the surgeries he was going through. And Michelle Obama, he calls her over bedside to him and he tells Michelle Obama, he says, "Ma'am, if you don't mind, please tell your husband I'm still in the fight. Go and tell your husband, the president, I'm still in the fight." This man just lost his leg and he tells the first lady that he is still in the fight. He's going to get back in the fight, which is just an incredible like statement. It's like, whoa, like when you hear that story, it's like it punches you in the chest. Like, look, man, I'm not trying to burst your bubble here. And this is the thing that Nick was told all the time. The same thing I was told throughout my life was you need to manage your expectations. Look, dude, you just lost a leg. You're not going back to combat. You're not going to be a Green Beret anymore. You're going to get out of the army. We're going to kick you out. We're going to medically discharge you. This is the reality of the situation. And Nick, yeah, his own words, he says, I had two options. I could roll over and die, or I could do what I was born to do, which is go back and serve as a Green Beret. And, Nick famously says it. He doesn't do very well with the rolling over and dying part of things. And so, what did he do? I think it's like 18 months later, he goes through full rehab, passes a bunch of tests that he should not have been able to pass, and he ends up going back to combat as the first above the knee amputee as a Green Beret. And so I met Nick at a veterans event a couple years ago. Nick gave this incredible speech. Get to meet him after the event. I said, "Hey man, I've read your book. I've seen what you're doing. I want to write a book and I want to become a speaker. On your level, like how do you do it? Like can I get on a call with you sometime?" He gave me his card. I get on a call with him. He explains the whole book publishing process to me. So I said, "Roger that." I got to work on the book, knocked out the book. Nick, like I said, he endorsed the book. His name's on the back of it. Now I work with Nick and his team, his speaking team, his company, Precision Components. So I'm one of the speakers, one of the assets on his team, along with I don't know, 2 dozen others. And we so Nick and I connected in that way at that event, and just Nick's absolute like will and determination to come back from what he had come from with that injury. It resonated with me the way that he broke it down in his book, because it was like a no bullshit answer. It wasn't like I sat around and I just hoped really hard and all these things came together and I got lucky. Like Nick literally talks about it in his book Objective Secure, the step by step process. Then he talks about the damn meals that he ate, the workouts that he did. He talks about everything that he did to get back to where he was at. Not only that, but when I told Nick that I was serious about what I'm doing, he got on the phone with me. He gave me the play by play. I executed. I executed everything that I needed to execute, and Nick has just been a continuous fountain of support and like knowledge, and just he's just an incredible resource. He's an incredible human. Um, the man of his word. I can call him, I can text him, and I can say, "Hey, man, I got a question. What about this?" And he shoots back, and we figure it out, and we get it done. And so Nick is one of the few people who has ever been a part of my life who says, "Whatever you need, I got you." And I go to Nick, and he's really, really got me. And I'm not saying like he gives me money or he does things for me. He gives me the tools and the guidance to execute on the things that I want to get done, and then I go and do it. That's just it. Nick gives me that little bit of a light. He kind of tells me which route to take, or gives me guidance on which one he would take, or why he took certain routes. I take those things. I do whatever analysis I want to do with it, and then I freaking make a decision and go. And Nick is just he's just a great guy, man. He's a great guy, and I look forward to working with him in the future, and continue doing what I'm doing. So,
Yeah, spectacular, man. Got back to combat. It's pretty savage.
yeah, he's got a hell of a story. He's a really, really good dude.
Okay. Nick, Green Beret. What would you say to people that have considered writing a book and maybe they're scared or they don't know where to start? How does someone go about doing something like that, in your opinion?
Like most things in life, you got to start.
Just do it.
Just do it. Then put a date on it. Put a date on it. Like I said about running, right? People tell me all the time, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna run a marathon. I'm gonna
Yep.
compete in jujitsu. I want to do that. Oh, I want to do that. I want to do that. I wonder what that's like. I wonder what that's like." Put a date on it. Put a date on it and go find out what it's like. Put a date on it. You want to go do something? Put a date on it. Period. Just put a date on it. You want to write a book? Put a date on it. 3 months from now, 90 days, 60,000 words. Figure it out. I don't know what the math is on that, but it's a little, I don't know, what is it, a
Do
little
it.
over 1,000 words, whatever it is. Put those words in every week, every day. Okay. That's how you do it, man. There's no secret to any of these things anymore. Everybody. So
That's
here,
right.
so you know what? I'm so glad this is going to be gold. All right.
Yeah.
If this is gold right here. So many people want to know how you do anything. So many people want to know, how do you become successful? How do you write a book? How do you run a marathon? How do you do whatever to become successful? They want two answers, and neither one of them work for them. One answer they want is hard work and discipline. Hard work and discipline. If you work hard and you are disciplined about anything that you want to do, you will be successful. It is only a matter of time. Hard work and discipline. The problem with that answer is that when you tell somebody, "Well, I got everything that I got in my life through hard work and discipline," they say, "There's no way it's that simple. It's no way it's that easy." And so they say, "Hey, this guy's full of shit." Hard It's more than just hard work and discipline, obviously. So it doesn't work. So then you take the other route, right? And you tell them, "Okay, well, okay, you want to learn how to write a book? Okay, first you have to write 60,000 words, 60 to 80,000 words. Okay. Then you have to hire an editor. The editor is going to do two developmental edits. You're going to get both of those edits back. Each one of those edits takes you about 2 weeks to review and make adjustments. So then between those two edits, you're talking about 4 weeks. You're talking about a month. Then you have to send it back again for a third edit. The third edit takes another 4 weeks or so, and full return of you getting it back, you reviewing it, making adjustments, sending it back to the editor. Then the editor gets you in touch with the proofreader. Well, the proofreader's backlog is about 3 months. So now you have to wait 3 months for the proofreader can get to your book. Okay, 3 months goes by. Proofreader gets to your book. Now your book has been proofread, which takes about 2 weeks, comes back to you. Once again, you review all the changes. Takes about 2 weeks. So now you're talking 3, 4, 6, 7 months into the process, and you're talking about $8,000 to $10,000. Well, now you have to come up with a title. Now you have to get your book designed. You have to get your book layout done. That takes a whole another 2 months or so to get done, plus a little bit more money. Then you have to finally pull this whole thing together and actually publish it, which in totality now we're talking about a year and some change, for most people. And then after that, you write the book, it's on Amazon. Now what? Now you have to market it. Now you have to talk about it. Now you have to sell it, which is its own entire other beast. And most people, I've lost them about 45 seconds ago. when I say you have to write 60,000 words. They're like, oh, I can't do that. I can't
Right.
do that. That's too much. I don't have time for it. So listen, here's what I just told you, right? Hard work and discipline. That's all it takes to do anything successful in life. Hard work and discipline. That's all it takes. However, that's too simple for most people. So once you break it down step by step of what you have to do to actually do anything in life, you want to get stronger, you have to eat these kind of foods, train this much, rest this much, and go to this kind of gym, right? And you'll get stronger. And then when you break it down like that, what people will do is they'll say, well, I can't do that. So that's out of the picture. Well, I don't have this. That's out of the picture. I can't eat like that. I work this much. I have kids. I have all these excuses. And they'll pull everything out of your story of how you came to be who you are, and those are all the left of the pile of excuses in their hands that say, hey, this is why I can't do it, right? So there's the
Yep.
problem with trying to explain how you do anything to anybody, is that they don't even want to know. So when people ask me how I did a lot of things in my life, I don't mind explaining it to most people, but in reality, I've come to terms with the fact that they're not going to do any of this shit. It's going in one ear and out the other, you know? And so when most people come to me about help, like, hey, Seth, how do I fix my mental health? How to become more resilient? How to become tougher, stronger, better, smarter, whatever? Go to the gym for 30 days and then come back to me. Read these two books and come back to me. I give people two books to read every time. Read these two books on trauma, come back to me. They never come back to me. Why? Because they never read the books, right? People don't want that. There's this illusion of like, oh man, I'd love to be this person. I'd love to go and do that thing.
Right.
It's this illusion that's out there, is floating in space. They don't actually want it. What they want when they come to you for help a lot of times is they want more excuses of why they can't go and do that thing. And the more you tell them how to be successful, every one of those steps is just another excuse to being the person that they already are. You
That's
got me
right,
fired
man.
up on
Hard
that
work
one.
and discipline. Yeah, no, that was amazing. I mean, it's just so true. Everyone wants the easy way out. They want some magic pill or some magic one-liner that's going to solve all their problems. In reality, you just have to do it. Hard work, discipline every day. Just do what you're afraid to do, and you'll become great. And it's just wow, man. Thank you for sharing all that. That's an incredible story you have, and I love the man that you are. I'm glad to call you a friend. Thank you, man.
Yeah, of course, bro. I appreciate you having me on. I hope this lands and gets in the right ears for people.
Yeah, I hope some people will actually work hard.
Absolutely.
All right, man. Take care.
Yep. Thank you.